Welcome back to Globesweeper Hex Puzzler. This is probably going to be one of those single-level videos, because we're going to take a look at Diamond, and this is actually the third time I'm trying to record this, because the first time I felt like I didn't explain one section well enough, and the second time I slipped up and accidentally clicked the tile when I meant to click the other button, so that happens. So let's jump in again and go for Diamond. This level is not, contrary to the name, it's not overly hard for the most part. Most of the level is totally fine. It just takes a bit of time to do, but there are two sections that are pretty tricky. One in particular is probably the single hardest thing we've seen so far in the game, so that is the thing I couldn't really explain very well, so I'm trying to do this again, and we'll see if it goes any better this time. So, because we have line clues in this level, press the X button on your keyboard to mark all of the lines available, and then once we're done with a line, we can just click it to unmark it to keep track of which ones are done and which ones are not. So to start, we have this 3 here that needs all of these tiles, and there's going to be a lot of just normal tile solving in this that I'm probably not going to explain. You should be able to do this stuff normally, easily enough at this point. But up until this point, you just solve the tiles normally, and now we can go either left or right. Let's start by going right here. So this 4 cluster has 3 tiles. It can't connect up to here, because then we connect up to this tile as well, making it a 5 cluster. So this tile cannot be marked. We can remove that tile. Now we look at this 6 area here, which has 3, 4, and 5, and needs 1 more tile in this area. And you can look at the 4 cluster or the 3. Either way, the 3 is maybe a little more intuitive. So this 3 needs 1 more tile here, which will complete the 6, meaning this tile can't be marked. And because we removed that tile, this 4 now only has 1 more tile that it can possibly go to complete the 4 cluster. And then we can disconnect that cluster from all other tiles, and the 6 area is done. Then we have some basic tiles until this point, and now we look at this 6 area, which has 4, 5, and we'll need 1 tile here for this 1 clue. So these 3 tiles can't be marked, and we can remove all of them. And then we get the 4 here, this 2 is now done, and this 3 is done, but let's hold off on that for just a second. We'll just go on up until this point, because now we can't advance over here on the first triangle anymore. But before we jump over here, let's go solve this left side instead. So right here, we have a 6 line with only 6 tiles remaining, so all of these have to be marked, and that line is now done. Now this 7 area has 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, so it's already done, and these tiles can't be marked. And now we get some basic tile solving up until this point, and now here we have a 6 cluster already with 6 tiles, so no other tile connected to it can be marked, and we can delete all of those. Now we look at this 8 and 7. The 8 here has 4 tiles, 5, 6, 7. So it needs 1 more out of these 2 tiles. This 7 has 3, 4, 5, 6, and we know we need to mark 1 of these 2, which will complete the 7 as well, meaning these 2 tiles cannot be marked. Now, because we know we'll use 1 of these 2 tiles, that will also complete this 1, so these 3 tiles can also be removed. And now we can just solve this area normally with the tiles. Like so, and we can't continue on here because the 7 area has 6 tiles and we don't know where in here the last tile will be. So let's leave this off. We can jump over here, we can jump over here, but let's go here where we left off at the beginning with this 3 line, which is already complete, so all of these tiles can be removed. Now here we get a 3 and a 4, so all of those tiles have to be marked. And now we can look at this 7 area here, which has 4 tiles. We need 2 more tiles here for this 2 cluster, so that's 6 tiles total, and then we can at most have 1 tile in these 2 tiles or these 3 tiles. Now if we look at this 5 line here, this 5 line has 3 tiles already, and can at most have 4 outside of this area, so it will need at least 1 tile here, and that's all we have available for the 7. So we have to mark this tile, and we will need to use 1 of these 3 tiles for the 7 and this 5. Meaning these 2 tiles cannot be marked. And now these are complete. And this 2 now only has these 2 options. And now we can look at this 6 cluster, which has 5 tiles total. This 5 line still needs 1 more tile out of these 3, so regardless of where this is placed here, the 6 cluster will be done, meaning we have to disconnect all of the tiles. Like if it's here, we have to disconnect all of these tiles. If it's here, we have to disconnect all of these tiles, and so on. So these 2 tiles can never be marked, or it completes the 6 cluster, and we would have to delete all 3 of these. So because we'll have a tile marked here, these 2 can be removed. And now the 1 here is already done, and we can just solve this area with the normal tiles. So this line is now done. Let's ignore this one for now and just move on here. This 4 only has 4 around it. This 6 area has 4, 5, and 6, so all of these tiles can be removed. Up until that point. Now, here we have an 8 cluster with 4, 5, 6, and 7 tiles. So we need 1 more tile, and it has to be this or this tile. So, regardless, this tile cannot be marked, because if it is, then we can no longer complete this 8 cluster without connecting it up to another tile, which would make it 9. So this tile you can remove. Now, because we use only one of these 2 tiles to complete the 8, that means the 3 here will only have 1 tile here, and needs to mark 2 and 3. Now, because of that, we can no longer use this tile for the 8 cluster, or we also connect it up to 2 more tiles, making it a 10 cluster instead. So this tile has to be removed, and this has to be the final tile in this 8 cluster. And then we get these 2 as well for this 4 tile. And here, this 8 area has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, so it's already done, and these 3 tiles can all be removed. And then we solve some basic tiles. Until that point. Now here, we have a 6 area with 4 tiles already, so we need 2 more tiles in these 6 tiles. Here for this 8, we also have 4 tiles, and we need 4 more tiles in this area. So if you look at the overlap, for this 6 we can at most use 2 tiles out of these 5 that overlap the 8. So for the 8 we have 4 tiles, maybe 2, and then we only have access to 2 more spots for 7 and 8. So we have to mark these 2. We will need to use 2 tiles in the shared area, which will complete the 6, so this outside tile cannot be marked. And that just completed this 3 cluster, so we can delete all of the tiles connected to it, and then just solve this area normally at this point. Until here. Now we have to go all the way back and look at this 2 line here, which has 1 tile and can only have 1 more tile in this area. Now here you can look at either one of these 3s, it doesn't really matter. If you look at this one, we can at most have 1 tile here, and then we have 2 tiles, and we will have to mark this tile for the 3rd tile here. So we need to use one of these tiles for this 3, which means that these 2 tiles cannot be marked in this 2 line. Now that only leaves us 3 spots for this 3, so these 2 have to be marked, and this 3 is also done, and the line is done. Now we again get some basic tiles to solve. So just do that until that point. And now we added this tile, which is reached by this 7 area clue, which has 4, 5, 6, and now 7. So all of these tiles are now removed. And this area is now complete, this first triangle. And now we can jump over here or here. I guess we'll go here, why not? But this one, I think, is an area that I will show in paint a little bit. But we look at this center 5 line here, we have 1 tile. And we only have 4 more tiles available, so all of these have to be marked. Now here, we have a 5 line with 2 tiles, and we need to mark 3 more tiles out of these 4. Here we have a 2 line with 1 tile, so we need to mark 1 more tile here. Now what you have to keep in mind is that all 4 of these tiles and all 4 of these tiles are touching this 8 cluster. So, since we have 4 tiles here already, we will have 1 tile here for 5 in this cluster, and we'll have 3 more tiles here for 8 in this cluster. So this 8 cluster will be completed using these lines in these 3, these tiles in these 3 lines. So because of that, we can look at this 5 line and think about which tiles in this area can we not mark. And this is where I'm gonna show this in paint. You can just work it out in your head. What happens if, since we need to mark 3 out of the 4 lines here, we essentially need to remove 1 tile. If you just think through what happens if you remove this tile, or this tile, or this tile, or this tile, what will happen to this line? You can see something. But let's show that in paint just for visual guidance. Alright, so here we are. As I said, we need 3 tiles in this line. In other words, we need to put in 1 gap. So let's see what happens if we place the gap here and we mark these 3 tiles. Then the 8 will be complete using the final tile in this 2 line, so none of the tiles connected to this cluster can be marked, and all 4 of these are now connected, so all 4 of these will have to be removed. Now if we do this tile instead, we remove this one, then once again, all 4 of these tiles are touching one of these tiles in the 8 cluster. So again, all of these 4 would have to be removed. And then if we remove this one, once again, this one touches these 2, and these 2 touch these 2 tiles, so they would all have to be removed once more. But finally, if this is the gap in this line, then we get these 3 marked, and only these 3 tiles are touching the 8 cluster now. So these 3 will still be removed regardless of where the gap is in this line, but this tile you cannot say anything about. You can't remove this one because this one could still be marked because it's not connected to the 8 cluster in this case. So we can safely remove these 3 tiles to begin with. So back in the game, we delete these 3 tiles. That gives us a 4 here, and this 3 here, which now has a 2 here that's completed, so these tiles are removed. And it turned out we didn't mark this tile, but just don't fall for that trap. We can't say that this one will always be removed until we get to this point. That's just a little logic step to keep in mind. And then we can solve these tiles a little bit up until this point. And then here we have a 5 area now that has 5 tiles, meaning this tile can't be marked. This 2 is now already done, and then this 3 will need this tile, and that is the 1 tile for this 2 line, so this tile can't be marked, and these 2 lines are complete. I could have deleted this one a long time ago, and this 2 tile is also done, and we can just solve some basic tiles here. Until this point. But now we can't continue here, and we can't continue here, so we have to go elsewhere. So let's go all the way back and look at this area here. So right here, we have a 4 line with 2 tiles. We need 2 more tiles in these 4 tiles. And same as with the 8 over there, we have a 6 cluster here that has 4 tiles, and we will use 2 tiles in this line to complete it, because all 4 of these tiles are connected to the 6 cluster here. Which means, because it'll be completed in these 2 lines, none of these tiles that are touching the 6 cluster can be marked, so we can remove all of these. And then solve some tiles normally here. And we look at this 9 here, which has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then needs 2 more tiles here. 2 more tiles, which will complete this 4 line because we already have 2 tiles, so this outside tile cannot be marked. And that gives us a 1 here that's already connected to a tile here, so these 3 tiles are removed. And that now gives us these 2 tiles as the final tiles in the 4 line. And then we can solve these normally until this point, and then we move on over here to this 4, which already has 4 tiles marked, so all of these are removed. And once again, we solve some tiles normally at this point. Until this point. Now we can look at this 5 and 4 we uncovered. This 5 here has 4 tiles marked, and we'll need 1 more out of these 5 tiles here. All of those 5 tiles are also included in this 4, and the 4 here has 1, 2, 3, and needs 1 more tile. But because this 5 needs 1 tile in these 5, that in turn will complete the 4 with a tile that will be in here, so these 2 tiles that are outside of this area cannot be marked. That gives us a 0 here now, and we can now just solve this area with the normal tiles. Then here we have a 4 area that also has 4 already, so it's done, and we can remove all of these tiles. This 2 here only borders these 2. And there we go. Now, here we can look at this line. We have a line of 3, and we already have 1 tile marked. And you can look at either of these 2, or any of the clues here, but just to make it simple, let's look at the 2 ones we have. So we have 1 tile here. We will need 1 of these 2 tiles marked for this one, so that's 2 in this line, and then we'll need 1 of these 2 tiles for this one, which is 3 in this line. So this tile and these 2 tiles cannot be marked. Now we can solve either one of these. Let's solve this area first because it's a little smaller. So this 2 now needs this tile, and we can just solve these tiles normally. until that point. Now here we have a 6 cluster and a 7 cluster. This 6 cluster has 4 tiles and needs 2 more. We know that we can't use this tile here, because then it would be connected up to the 7. We can't use any of these tiles, right? So to get 2 more tiles in the 6 cluster, we only have access to these 3 tiles. But can we even use this tile? To get to this tile, we would have to use this tile, which would then complete this 2, meaning we can't use this tile for the 6. So we only have 2 potential tiles that don't touch the 7 available for the 6 cluster. So we have to mark both of those 2 to complete this cluster and then disconnect it from the other tiles. And there we go. Now this area is done here. Now let's jump over back here again. This 3 only has 2 more options here. And some basic tile solving again. Until that point, this line is done. Right here, we have a 5 area with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these tiles are removed. This 2 is now done. This 4 needs these tiles. And then now this 3 line is already completed with 3 tiles. So this tile has to be deleted. And the 1 here is done. And we solved these normal tiles. And there we go, we're done with this area. Oh, also, I forgot this like super early on. Yeah, this 6 cluster, once we completed this line, has 6 tiles already, so this tile has to be removed. I should have said that like way earlier, but I guess it doesn't matter. Now we have to look at this area, I believe, and this is where it gets very, very tricky. Yeah, this is the one area that I had a hard time explaining, so let's hope that I can do a better job now. First off, this 6 line here has 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have only 1 more tile, so we have to mark that to complete this line. Right here, we need 4 tiles, and we have no tiles, so we have to mark all 4 of these. Now, this 6 cluster here has 4 tiles. We obviously can't connect it up to any of these tiles, or it connects up to far too many tiles, so all of these have to be deleted. Now though, this is the tricky part. So here, we have a 3 line with no tiles. We will need to mark 3 tiles in this line. So again, we need to remove 1 tile, essentially. There will be 1 gap. And yeah, I'm gonna jump over to Paint again and try my best to explain this, because this is it's a fairly like intuitive section if you think about it, what will happen to the 6 cluster, but it's very hard to put into words what you actually have to do and how you have to think about it and how you reach the conclusion. But let's see if I can do a good job. Alright, so here we are. Let's think about this 6 cluster here. Is it possible to complete this 6 cluster without using any of the tiles in this 3? To do that, we would have to not touch any of the tiles in this 3. So if we, for example, use this tile, then it's no longer possible to use any of these tiles without touching 2 or more of the tiles in this 3. We can at most have 1 gap in this 3 line, so if we delete this tile now, we still have to mark these 3 tiles, and then we can't use another tile in this line to complete the 6 without touching any of the 3. And it doesn't matter where you put that. If this is the gap, then we can't use any tiles at all, and if like this is the gap, then once again we can use 1 tile here, but then this would have to be disconnected, assuming we want to try and use 2 tiles in this line. So it's not possible to use 2 tiles in this line, we can only use 1, which means we have to use at least 1 tile of the 3 here for the 6 cluster. And since we have to use 1 tile here to get to the 3 line, that means we can only use 1 tile. So we have to have a separate tile somewhere in this 3 line. So like here with a gap, or maybe the gap is here and this is the tile, doesn't matter, but we now know that we can't have all 3 of these tiles together. If we do that, it is not possible to complete this 6 using any of the available tiles, because we would connect it up to far too many tiles for the 6 cluster. So because of that, that means that these edge tiles cannot be removed. If we were to remove either of these 2, then we are left with a 3 in a row, a 3 cluster in this line, and we need to have a separate tile available for this 6 cluster. So that lets us mark both of these tiles in the actual game. And when we mark these 2, things open up, because we now get a 3 cluster here, which obviously can't be connected to the 6 cluster, so these 2 tiles are removed. That still doesn't help all the way now, though, because we still need one gap here, and we will need one gap here. But since we already know that we will use one tile in this line, and one tile in this line for the 6 cluster, we can pretty easily see that it has to be this tile, because we have one gap here. If we were to use this tile for the 6 here, then we can no longer connect it up to this tile, and we can no longer connect it up to either of these two, because regardless of where the hole is, it will be connected up to 2 tiles here for the 6. So the 6 cannot use this tile, it has to use this edge tile. And I mean, you can see that already, really, that the 6 had to, in the very beginning, it had to use one of the edge tiles here, because if it doesn't, then these 2 tiles both border more than one tile in this 3, which means we can't keep it isolated as a one tile in this 3, if that makes any sense. So this tile cannot be marked for the 6, so we have to disconnect it, and this has to be the final tile in the 6 cluster. And now we get these 2 lines are done, and we can solve these tiles normally. A lot of normal tile solving, we didn't even need that 5 area there. And now here, we can look at this 6 line, which has 3 tiles already, and we need 3 more. If we look at this 2, it has 1 tile, so we can only use one of these 2 tiles. So since we have 3 tiles in this 6 line, we can have 4, and then we need to use 5 and 6. That now completes this 2, so this tile is gone, and this has to be the final tile in this line. And then again, just some normal tile solving here. This 5 area has 2, 3, 4, and 5, so these tiles are all gone. And this is the final tile. So there we go. It is still hard to explain, but I feel like that was at least a better explanation than what I did. Maybe there's an even better way to think about it. As always, feel free to let me know if there's any better way to think about any area that I'm trying to explain. It's hard to put into words sometimes, but like I said, it's not the worst level in the game, but it can take some time to get used to that way of thinking and working your way through all of the potential options to see which ones cannot happen, and therefore you have to use the one that can happen. So, hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll definitely be going into some easier levels. I think all 3 of the ones I practiced from this point on were not bad at all, so that shouldn't be a problem. I'll see you then. Bye-bye!